Before Mega Man X8 was released, and because Capcom probably didn't think fans would wait a whole year after Mega Man X7 for some more action, they went and made an RPG of all things that tied fans over. Mega Man X Command Mission, a game I've had to see so many times in rental stores and game shelves that I'm frankly surprised that it's only now that I'm playing this. But my curiosity never went past the box cover. Gotta say though, I really like X's new armor design in this. This looks like an X that's wiser and more capable. Command Mission is set about 100 years after the X series, which you would think would tie to the Mega Man Zero series is that too. It's set a century afterwards, but Command Mission is very much an alternate continuity. It's doing its own thing. It's not your traditional Mega Man X for starters. Sigma is nowhere to be seen in this, and perhaps most importantly, X has this spiffy new energy scarf that's simply there for aesthetic. Looks pretty cool though, can't really say why Zero and Axel aren't given any additional touch-ups. They look about the same as before though. Maybe my eyes are playing tricks on me, but everyone looks a little bulkier than usual. I noticed it the most with Zero, like I swear it's not really Zero I'm looking at sometimes, but rather a guy in a cardboard Zero costume. Most of the development team for this also worked on Capcom's Breath of Fire series, and because of that, Command Mission is often seen as a Breath of Fire game with Mega Man X characters. And hey, if you're gonna bring Mega Man into a completely different genre, I think it makes sense to hire people who are familiar with that kind of thing. That in mind though, I never played a Breath of Fire game, so I can't really compare the two for this video, if you were expecting any of that at all. But now that we're in RPG territory, I have a completely different set of expectations. I had a feeling before popping this in that this wasn't going to be the standard run and gun game that I've grown accustomed to. I wondered, how would Command Mission handle the Mega Man X lore, and what kind of story would it tell? I think I can best sum up my answer like this. Okay, so our story begins with X-Zero and this one other dude I've never seen until this point named Shadow being tasked by Colonel Red-Ups of the government to infiltrate Giga City and stop this dude named Epsilon from inciting a rebellion against the citizens of the city with his personal army of Mavericks. They also believe Epsilon is planning to use this element called Force Metal to further his cause, for it could potentially enhance the attributes of Reploids or turn the Maverick if used recklessly. X and Zero managed to locate Epsilon on top of the ruins, but faster than you can say the sky is blue, it turns out Shadow here was a sleeper agent working for Epsilon, and then proceeds to turn on the hero. Zero is knocked out of commission, and X, in one of his more pragmatic moments, manages to make his escape for the time being. The unconscious X soon wakes up in the care of New Hope, a resistance against the rebellion. Yeah, this game has a resistance and a rebellion. It's not confusing at all. Members of New Hope plead X to rescue their leader Chief R from the ongoing rebellion invasion, and without much time to lose, X does just that, while also befriending this hipster-looking card-playing douche named Spider. With control of the central tower back in the hands of the Resistance, Chief R is willing to help X complete his mission against Epsilon and try to help find Zero. And then it's standard Mega Man X. Yeah, Command Mission is broken up into chapters, kind of like Paper Mario to compare it to something, and every single one of them can be summed up as X heading into a new base to recruit a new character, stops the Maverick of the day, heads back to Central Tower to get the new mission, and the process repeats. And this is it. Really. X eventually finds Zero alive and well. The gang also run into Axel in time and he joins up with them, and then soon our heroes clash with Epsilon. But then it turns out Epsilon was only a pawn for the true villain of the game, and if you think I'm going to say Sigma, nope, it's Colonel Red-Ups, X and Zero's superior, bum bum bum. And what's his reasoning for all this? He wants Reploids to evolve and make them the superior beings. Well, we've heard that before many times, so yeah, that's nothing new. X and the gang take him out, the day is saved, and the game quickly rushes to the credits. Man, this is about as basic as you can get for a story. It's par for the course when it comes to Mega Man, I suppose, but as an RPG, it's just a caliber above, I want to say, Final Fantasy Mystic Quest. There's next to no development for anyone. There's only one real overarching plot, and that's the stuff dealing with Epsilon and later Colonel Red-Ups, and it never goes beyond any of that. We're introduced to a healthy number of other protagonists. I already mentioned Spider, but there's also the towering Massimo, the ninja thief Marino, and the cute and innocent Cinnamon. Unfortunately, after we're introduced to them, they don't amount to anything afterwards. We get maybe one or two quirks about them. Spider's the suave card dealer, Marino likes to steal things, and Cinnamon is white mage bitch. After that, they're names on a party list. As the story continues, we only really get input from X, Zero, and Axel, almost as if the others don't even exist, and when they do show up, it's only for the small observational quip. Out of the new guys introduced, I think Massimo comes the closest to having an arc worth a damn, as he's not sure if he's worthy enough to wear the armor of his past mentor, but later finds the strength within to make the armor his own. It's not original in the slightest, but it's something. It's too bad that Massimo is a playable character. Kinda sucks though. He can hit hard with the right stat growth, but he has an inherent weakness to all the basic elements, making him too fragile and too much of a reliability. As soon as I got another melee fighter, he went right into the box. Giga City and Central Tower as a locale is nothing more than a central hub. You have shopkeepers to sell you things, a teleporter to take you to areas you've already been to, and some of the blandest NPCs you can ask for in an RPG. Also, robot children. How does that work? Do Reploids fucking have kids? Do they grow organically, or are they later dismantled and rebuilt as teenagers and adults? This is the kind of shit I think about when nothing else piques my interest. And because nothing really piques my interest, those supposedly big moments in the plot don't have much of an impact on me. When Spider is later killed off, I thought, oh, I guess that's sad. I don't think I learned much about him to feel anything though. Or how about the moment when it's revealed that Colonel Redux was masquerading as Spider the whole time using the same copy technology that Axel has? Okay, that's kind of a twist. I thought this would lead to some soul searching in Axel's case. Maybe Colonel Redux knows something about Axel, but nah. It's just for a gotcha moment, meaning nothing in the bigger picture. Or how about when one of Epsilon's commanders, Ferrum, turns on the Colonel because she was mistreated in one scene and then we're supposed to act as if her death was a sad thing? I'm sorry, but no. Everything happens too fast and it leaves Command Mission, as far as the plot goes, undercooked. Command Mission's themes and plot devices are literally no different than what's been done before in the X series, but now it's close to a 20-hour RPG, and no man, you just can't stretch that and expect everything to work out. There needs to be more in both the world around us as a setting, what you do in that world, character arcs, character development, all of that. Without any of that, Command Mission drags narratively, and in my opinion, if a story drags, it can lead to the game itself feeling sluggish, and unfortunately, I think that's the case here. So Command Mission is a turn-based RPG. Just to cover the basics really quick, it's standard stuff. While exploring one of the many dungeons, so to speak, you fight random encounters. X does his little Michael Jackson pose here, and you gain experience that slowly levels your characters up, making them stronger and bulkier for later, more challenging encounters. There's money to collect for purchasing items, and those can be stronger weapons, sub-weapons for added effects, or force metal, what amounts to this game's armor. Opening treasure boxes in this game is a bit clumsy. In every other RPG I know, you inspect boxes with the confirmation button and then claim the rewards, but in Command Mission you have to dash through boxes to break them open, and I'm like, come on, that's just being different for the sake of being different. It's a small thing, but one I don't fully understand why it was implemented that way. And this little bit can fuck me up personally, but normally in other RPGs, the menu button is either the start button or triangle, but here the triangle button is the dash button, a maneuver that's normally reserved for the circle button, but in this game that turns out to be the menu button. Playing this right after marathoning all those X games was such a mindfuck to me because repeatedly I found myself opening the menu when I just meant to dash, since it's faster and all that. Not only that, but when you're messing around with items and equipment, you now have to press the triangle button to backstep on menus because hitting the circle button at this point cancels the menu entirely. I don't understand why that is, but it started to frustrate me. It was something my mind just couldn't process. Force metal can come in a lot of flavors: damage mitigation, stat increases, or status immunities. Nothing out of the ordinary, but there's also a limit to how much you can equip. If you try to equip all the good stuff at once, you run the risk of encountering a force metal hazard. Basically, if your erosion rate in here is greater than your current limit, you can be penalized with weaker stats for a time, but well, I never ran into this issue because if the game tells me that going over my erosion limit is bad, then you don't fucking do it. So I never once encountered a force metal hazard because, simply put, I never had my erosion level go overboard. I'd rather not leave my success in battle up to luck. Characters can be either projectile based or melee focused, either by default or depending on the type of weapon they currently have on. Projectile characters have better accuracy when it comes to aerial foes, while melee characters are better for interrupting ground-based assaults and piercing defenses. At the start of every turn, characters gain some weapon energy. Now, as you proceed through the game, you can purchase or come across a surplus of secondary actions that can either be additional attacks to supplement your basic attack like elemental missiles, or character buffs, something that can really spruce up the power of your next move. Weapon energy is also required to activate a character's action trigger where they perform a maneuver unique to them. Think of it like a limit break. For example, Zero here can unleash a barrage of sword strikes, Marino can spin these slot reels to do a different kind of attack depending on the result, and Cinnamon becomes a white mage bitch. There's still a degree of the classic rock, paper, scissors design from the franchise's roots. Enemies can be weak against particular elements, and in some scenarios it can completely shut down certain types of attacks. When you discover these weaknesses, it can feel pretty good. I don't like this flamethrower this guy shoots out, so I hit it with a water-based weapon, and look at that. Now he can't do it anymore. That's pretty cool. That's rewarding. Do enough damage at once and you can do the final strike. It's basically one last fuck you to your opponent as your team bombards them with an assload of bullets and weapon strikes. But unless you trigger a final strike against multiple baddies at once, these normally only target one enemy at a time, and that can feel like a waste. It's like, guys, there's plenty of other bad guys to shoot. Maybe we can turn our guns and aim these explosions on the other enemies watching? That's one of my biggest problems with Command Mission's battle system. There aren't enough attacks that multi-target. I can think of X's action trigger, but you need to wait until you have enough weapon energy to activate it. Axel can transform into different Mavericks, some of which sport multi-hitting effects, but they're either laughably weak or have wildly inconsistent accuracy. For Spider, fighter, it's luck-based. The kind of attack you can do depends on the hand you draw in this poker game. This battle system, while a bit rudimentary, gets the job done, but often battles can take a little long to complete. Encounters as a whole kind of have this inherently sluggish feeling to them. It could be the battle animations. I do think everyone could be a little faster when executing attacks and such. Other times, the slow pace could be attributed to other things. It could either be those times when you're facing off against a large amount of mooks at once with no surefire way to deal with them all at the same time, or it could be those annoying goons that can call for extra assistance as many times as they want with zero consequence to my knowledge, or they could be those foes that set up countermeasures that require a slower, more methodical approach in a game that is already kind of slow. And for the record, if you're going to have us face a lot of enemies at once, it's probably not a good idea to give them stationary sound effects. One of my least favorite enemies in this game are these bunny bots, not just because they can fucking reproduce, but because they all make these hopping noises, and when there's 4 of them on the screen at once... Holy fuck, but as I was saying, battles can be a real drag when facing multiple foes at once, even with free access to a character's hyper mode. Think of this as a super state you can activate at any time as long as you have enough charges for it. While in hyper mode, your stats are increased big time and you can deal some huge damage with proper setup, such as this: fill up Zero's weapon energy to maximum, turn on hyper mode, apply the heat haze buff so that he can strike twice in one attack, and then activate his action trigger and watch him easily deal some 5-digit carnage. Now that is awesome. X is no slouch either. His hyper mode can deal just as much damage under the right conditions, and Marino gains so much speed with her hyper mode that you can get an absurd amount of turns before the bad guy has a chance to do anything. When it comes to dishing out damage, you're no doubt capable of doing so as long as you recognize the situation you're in and act accordingly. Some bosses require waiting for an opening, some require switching up what kind of attack you use on it. Despite only being able to use 3 characters at a time, you're free to switch anyone out for someone else without wasting a turn, and there were a couple of times where I had to use this to interrupt a boss's strategy. Like against this asshole, Botos, the one that heals himself for an obnoxious amount if you don't take care of his little minions on time. Ugh. One of the worst fights in the game easily. But on the flip side, it was one of my favorite things about the fight against Scarface. If you hit him with a projectile, then you have to hit him with a melee attack afterwards, otherwise he takes way less damage until then, and I really liked how the fight challenged me on considering what character I should use before my next hyper onslaught is ready to go. But that's sadly what a lot of fights amount to in Command Mission. How can you ruin this guy's day with your hyper mode? You can take advantage of a boss's weakness to a certain element, if they have any at all, but the numbers simply don't compare to a hyper mode beatdown. They give you plenty of items that restore your hyper mode charges if you do some basic exploration, and there's no real penalty for abusing it, as dungeons will most likely end before you spend all your charges, and you can fully restore the party when you get back to Central Tower. My final party consisted of X, Zero, and Cinnamon. I had projectile coverage, melee coverage, and healing. A welcomed addition because unlike most RPGs I've played, Command Mission doesn't have healing items per se, instead you have sub-tanks. Like in the traditional series, sub-tanks can be used to restore health after you fill them up with enough energy you can find in these treasure crystals. In the menu or in battle, you can choose whether to spend sub-tank energy by healing a single party member, or spend a little more to heal the whole party a specific amount. Obviously, the bigger the heal, the more energy you have to spend, but besides that, that is the only way you can heal yourself without having Cinnamon in your party, because this game doesn't have the standard one-use healing items. Not in treasure chests, not in shops, none of that, and sub-tanks only last for so long. Cinnamon is the only character who has access to healing abilities. I'm sure with enough study and practice, you can somewhat reliably depend on nothing but sub-tanks and rock a party of 3 damage dealers, but starting with the second half of the game, enemies and bosses start dealing out pretty damn strong attacks that can make you drain your sub-tanks uncomfortably quick, so it helps to have Cinnamon on standby, but this has the consequence of making battles take even longer to finish, since you're only allowed 3 characters at once, and one is basically on healing duty and nothing else. And given how damaging bosses can get later on, it's unlikely characters like Cinnamon have a chance to do anything else without a string of good luck. Mega Man X Command Mission is not complicated in the slightest, but the game is so painfully one note that after about chapter 5, it wears thin. The battle system is easily the most interesting thing about the game, but god, the rest of it falls so flat on its face. The central hub is not very interesting, and every dungeon has you doing the same tasks. You travel down indistinguishable corridors, you got treasures to find a key to unlock a door, you fight some random encounters, and then you fight the Maverick. There is next to no variety in what you do in dungeons. It's repetitious to a large degree and makes areas feel totally forgettable. After a bit, the game becomes absolutely mindless, and by chapter 8 and especially chapter 9, dungeons overstay their welcome with needlessly repetitive back and forth progression. The final chapter tries to pay homage to the classic formula by having a boss rush, and I got tired at the very thought. But thankfully, it's only half a boss rush, so maybe they got cold feet during the middle of designing this place, but it makes the whole conclusion feel disorganized. It was disheartening to learn that after the first few chapters, I've seen the whole game. The battle system is fine, but that has its own share of problems on top of the rest of the game simply not making the cut. The story is no more in-depth than what the other X games could cover in 2 hours time, and that to me is one of the biggest sins you can do in an RPG. The NPCs aren't interesting, the dungeons aren't interesting, and there's little to do outside the main scenario besides collecting figurines, using cinnamon to make more force metal, or send robots to areas you already explored to get some items you can't get otherwise. And before you ask what you probably asked anyway, I know about the optional bosses, but I didn't bother because I honestly stopped caring. It's not Sonic Chronicles bad, but it's damn boring and required more and more energy out of me to just continue on. I didn't fall asleep, but the thought of replaying this makes me drowsy. I'd say you're better off avoiding this. There's far better RPGs you can spend your time on, and if something tied to the X series or just Mega Man in general, it's way too repetitive and slow to get going, and if it's not good at grabbing my attention, then it's probably not very good at all. Well, I was hoping I wouldn't end this marathon on a mediocre note, but I can't say I'm terribly surprised. Jumping out of the comfort zone to make a game in a completely different genre while still trying to pay respect to the series' roots is a tricky thing to do that often backfires. It can work, but in this case, it didn't. But that's all she wrote. We are done with the Mega Man X marathon. I hope you guys enjoyed my trip through the next generation of Mega Man. It was fun revisiting some of my favorite games of all time. It was interesting getting to finally experience those I never played until recently. And yeah, it was good to give the Blue Bomber a revisit. Next time I decide to do Mega Man, it'll be with the Zero series. But just to let you guys know, I'm going to be taking a break from marathons for quite a bit. There's a lot of individual stuff I want to look at in the coming months, and dear God, there's so much shit coming out, I can't possibly list them all. But before I head into the future, I do have a couple of announcements. First up, my Pixel Empire store has got some new shirts. In celebration of my Mega Man videos, I got this lovely new Somecallmejohnny design based on classic Mega Man. The artist did a magnificent job on this. Thank you so much. My robot master weapon should be called Dark Roast. Use it wisely. I also got this new shirt based on my shit-eating amiibo face. I've gotten tons of requests for this one, so here you go. It's my amiibo face. Wondering if that's an amiibo floating above me. It's not. It's a Funko Pop, and I can't fucking stand those. And secondly, if you're in the Savannah, Georgia area on November 10th, I'll be attending the Sonic and Sega Fan Jam event. I'm not going as a guest, I'm just going as a fan, so if you see me around, drop by and say hello. I'll be with Ryan from Brain Scratch Commentaries, my good friends from Find the Computer Room will be there, as well as Ian Flynn from the Sonic Comics, Tyson Hess, director of those lovely Sonic Mania adventure cartoons, and my man T. Lopes, sexy motherfucker. Looking forward to seeing all those guys there, and I hope you are as well. And with that said, I'll catch you guys with the next video. Thank you all for watching, have yourselves a fantastic night, and take care.